Hey, what's up YouTube? Dan the Fix-It Man. Got another quick video here for you. I'm going to show you how to change your front brake pads and your front brake rotors on a 2016 Mazda CX-9. Now the first thing I like to do before I take off the caliper is push these caliper pistons back in by putting a screwdriver in through this little opening and wedging up against the body of the caliper and pulling that towards you. What that will do is push the caliper pistons back inside the body of the caliper. It'll actually push the brake fluid backwards through the system here up into the master cylinder. So we need to pop the hood and take a look at our master cylinder and make sure that we have enough room so that that's not going to overflow and make a big mess when we do that. There's lots of ways to do this, and one way that a lot of people like to do is crack open the bleeder screw so that when they push the caliper pistons back in, the old fluid will come out through this bleeder screw rather than go up backwards through the system. If you prefer that method, that's fine. I don't usually do that method because that does risk introducing a little bit of air into the system, and then of course you'd have to bleed your brakes once you're done. The way that I'm going to do it here, I'm just pushing the fluid backwards and then we'll cycle it back again when we're done, and you do not have to bleed the brakes. But let's pop the hood and go take a look and make sure that we've got enough room in that master cylinder so that when we push these in, we're not going to overflow it. All right, so here's our master cylinder, and you can see that the fluid level is way down, almost close to the minimum. Chances are they have not been topping this off as the brake pads have been wearing down, and that's great. So when we push this caliper back in, we're going to just cause that fluid to rise inside here, and that's not a problem at all. A lot of people ask me if they need to remove this cap when doing so. You can if you'd like, but I have not noticed a difference in the resistance when pushing the caliper pistons back in, whether I remove the cap or not. It seems like any trapped air that's in here is still easily able to escape, even if I don't take the lid off, so I don't usually take it off. Part of the reason I don't take it off is because exposing that brake fluid to air, or the moisture in the air, causes it to degrade and go bad. Brake fluid is hygroscopic, meaning that it absorbs moisture, and that causes it to go bad. So I usually leave this cap on unless we need to open that up in order to see the fluid level. In our case, you can see it's right down here, it's obvious, and we've got plenty of room. So let's go ahead and go push that caliper piston back in, and we should be good to go. Now, a strong, stout screwdriver works pretty well. As long as you've got enough room in here, all we need to do is just put that screwdriver in, or a small pry bar is fine, and then just pull that towards you. Now our wheel is turning, which is fine, but we're also causing that caliper to slide. You see that? It's moving freely, meaning we've got a lot more room in there. Now I'm also going to shift the screwdriver in. See if I can show you. You see right there? I've also pushed the inside pad in, so now I can get in there and get a little bit more travel, and that way I'm able to push the caliper pistons all the way back in. You can also do 2 screwdrivers or 2 pry bars at a time, and then just pull that towards you. There we go. Now that also did another thing for us. As an added bonus, that turned the wheel out here to the right so that we're going to have a little bit more room to take this caliper off. Now that that's pushed in, we can loosen and remove these 2 caliper slide pins. And these are a 17 millimeter. Now I'm just going to use a small impact that'll fit in here. This is the 2960 by Milwaukee with a little impact wobble and a 17 millimeter impact socket. Now take note on these slide pins that they're different sizes, different diameters. I'm going to take them out and hold them here next to each other so you can see. You see the bottom one is different, it's smaller. The top one is larger. So make sure that you just kind of keep track. It's also, the top one's also longer. So I'll set these aside and we'll get those cleaned up and re-greased before we put them back in. But now we can remove the caliper. These little S-hooks come in really handy for hanging calipers, and I picked these up a while ago. I wish I would have bought them a long time ago, but I really like them because now that we pull off the caliper, we can just hook this on here and hang it way up out of the way on the coil spring. Those are just our shims falling out. There we go. The idea is you just don't want to let this dangle from the brake line. Now we can take out the old brake pads, and this one's kind of falling out because I was prying against it, and you can see how worn down that was. The little noisemaker right here is shiny on the end. That means that that has already started scratching on the rotor. So it was definitely time to do our pads. But just kind of take note to the orientation and the location or placement of this. In our case, the squealer was at the top on the inside pad. Then we can take out this other pad here too. Same thing, very worn down, but not quite hitting the backing plate yet. Now we need to remove the caliper bracket, and that's held on by these 2 17 millimeter caliper bracket bolts. And I'm going to use the same 2960 Milwaukee little impact here and take this off. It's a good idea to have one hand holding that caliper bracket as you loosen that so that this doesn't drop to the ground. We can go ahead and pull these bolts out, set those aside. Now there's a few different ways to get the rotor off. Sometimes they'll just fall right off, and we didn't get that lucky this time. If you look right here, there's a threaded hole in the rotor itself that you can put a bolt through the rotor, and that will press against the hub and basically act as like a press or a force screw and pop that off the hub. Or you can also just go with this right here, the Tanya Harding method, and just give it a few whacks with the Rotor Remover 9000. Let's give it a go here and see if that works. There we go. Now before we put on the new rotor, I'm going to clean all the rust off of this hub, and I'm just going to use this little wire brush on the drill. Just make sure that you wear some safety glasses if you're going to use something like this. That looks good. Now I'm also going to brush the surface of this with some anti-seize just to make sure that the new rotor doesn't get stuck to this hub. Just a thin coat is really all you need, but a little bit of this stuff goes a long way. That looks good. Now before we put on the new rotor, we need to grab some brake parts cleaner and wipe this down. These are packed in some sort of an oil to protect them and prevent them from rusting. Just spray a little bit on a paper towel. That works pretty well. All right, then we can put the new rotor on. All right, now before we put this bracket on, we're going to change the hardware here, and we're also going to get this cleaned up. So we can just pull out all the old hardware, just these little abutment clips. They just pop right out. Now, if you look carefully in these channels, you can see a little bit of corrosion starting to happen, and we really want to clean that up, and we're going to put a little bit of grease underneath these clips to prevent that from rusting and causing those to swell. So I'm just going to use a wire wheel here on a drill. That works pretty well. Just again, remember to wear some safety glasses if you're going to use something like this. But let's go ahead and just get those cleaned up real quick. There we go. Now before I put these little clips on, I'm going to put a little bit of this caliper grease underneath there, and that is not so much of a lubricant as it is a protectant, and what that will do is help prevent corrosion and rust buildup underneath where these clips go. We don't want rust in here or any buildup because that'll push up on those clips and that can cause the pads to seize or bind. All right, now we can put in the new abutment clips. Just line those up and they should just snap right in like that. Just make sure that they sit all the way flush. And each one of these is a little bit different design. You can see that these parts here need to be on the outside, not on the inside. Usually if I just have a little bit of grease left over on my glove, a little bit of that clean caliper grease, I'll just kind of put it down in these little channels here as well. And that seems to help the new pads move around in there nicely and not get hung up or stuck. But this is now ready to go back on. Now before we put the caliper bracket on, I'm going to put a little bit of medium strength thread locker on these caliper bracket bolts. That should work. All right, now we can put that caliper bracket back on and just get these started. I'm just going to snug these with this real quick. Now the torque spec that I found for these caliper bracket bolts is a range of 68 to 81 foot-pounds. I'm just going to go ahead and do 80 foot-pounds. All right, now on the new pads, remember we need to put the one with the squealer on the inside at the top. The squealer in this kit just comes loose, so we need to clip it on here to the end of the brake pad. Notice that's how the old one was. Same style of squealer. And this is ready to go in. Just line that up in those clips. And that looks perfect. I'm going to do the same with the outside pad here. Just line it up. Press it in place like so. Now I usually like to put a little bit of this silicone ceramic extreme brake parts lubricant on the back of the pad, or rather on the back of the shim on either side. Just a little bit seems to help quiet them down. It really helps eliminate or dampen some of the vibrations that cause brake noise. Just a little thin coating like that is good. All right, and then we can grab the brake caliper. Let's take it off of our caliper hook up here and just carefully place this over the pads. Now you might just have to pull these little rubber boots in to make sure that we get that lined up. But that looks good. All right, now we can put our slide pins back in, but I'm gonna clean them up first, and we're gonna add some slide pin grease to this before we put them in. And remember, the top is the longer, thicker one. We're gonna use this same caliper grease right here. This is the synthetic caliper grease by Versachem. Give that a nice coat of this grease here. All right, and then just pop that back in. Now here again, you may have to just make sure that that boot is not pinched or anything. Just make sure that you can get that in, like so. That looks good. Same with the lower one here. We'll just clean that up and put some grease on it. And we'll pop that one back in right over here. Now we're just gonna snug this with the impact real quick. Same with this one here. Now the torque spec on these caliper slide pins that I found online was a range between 62 and 68. I'm going to go ahead and do 65 foot-pounds. I'm going to use the gear wrench 85062 torque wrench. Get these torqued to 65. And you're done. Now it's very important that before you drive away, you need to step on the brake pedal several times. What that's going to do is push the caliper pistons back out, pressing these pads up against the rotor where they need to be. Now when you do that, don't press the brake pedal all the way to the floor. That can damage the seals in your master cylinder. Just press it down about halfway several times until it feels firm. And don't forget to double check the fluid level in your master cylinder and you should be good to go. I hope you liked the video. Please give it a thumbs up and subscribe if you don't mind. That does help me out. I'll get a link in the description where you can pick up some of these parts and tools used in the video as well. Thanks so much for watching, and good luck.